would you like to come?
Yeah, thank you.
Introduce yourself and say what you do.
Thank you, Martin. I'll introduce myself. Murad Qreshi. I'm an Assembly member. I'm one of the people you elect at the same time as the Mayor to keep an eye on the Mayor during the 4 years. Now that's it's a hard task because I'm not sure he knows what he's doing most of the time anyway. But that's my lot in life. Now I also chair the Environment Committee at City Hall, and also I chair something called the London Waterways Commission. I will be very focused on London context because I think there's a lot to be said just in London, let alone the whole country. But can I start by saying I don't disagree with anything my panellists have already said, except for one comment Ruth made about Obama. I had no expectations of him. He can't even close down Guantanamo Bay. I think that will be the true legacy of Obama's 2 terms in America. So I really didn't have any expectations beyond that. But otherwise, I'm signed up to everything else that Sophie, Susanna and Ruth have said, because it's a compelling story that we need to put out. And I think the way I try and do it is to tell it in a London context, both with, and with the title, More Floods, More Fuel Poverty. There is a particular context now. We've had, as mentioned earlier, record rainfall. It's not since records in 1910. It actually goes back 250 years.
But
250 years. So there's a record rainfall for January. We've also had record river flows in all the tributaries in the south of the United Kingdom. Interestingly enough, the River Brent has been flowing pretty strongly into the Welsh Harp. If they didn't have the 1 metre margin, I can tell you this, there'll be a lot more flooding around here than you realise, although I think this estate is on a hill, unless you tell me otherwise.
And then the River Brent's just down the road.
Is it? Okay. And then the final thing, which is I think the one which people are missing in all this analysis of the floods, is the groundwater levels have been going up. And it's something which we haven't had before, and I think it's a legacy of the way we've been constructing our homes in recent times. But can I say, let's be absolutely grateful for one bit of the GLC legacy, the Thames Barrier. I am not convinced in today's context that would have been built. Because of the political system that we've got in London. If I had my way, I wouldn't be an Assembly member, I'd be a councillor in the GLC pushing these issues. Because actually, the Mayor nor the Assembly has any control over the waterways of London, whether they be canals, rivers, the Thames. So that as a result, we don't have any jurisdiction over the Thames Water, PLA, Port of London Authority, nor the Canal and Rivers Trust. But can I just put that aside, because I think it's sometimes political systems are important in trying to grapple when they attempt to grapple with these issues, pertinent issues of the day. Now, there's 3 actions I would like to see with the tidal Thames. We have to go look beyond the Thames Barrier and look whether the proposals that are around, which actually go into 2070, should be brought forward. That there has been work done on the environment by the Environment Agency, work that I've seen and convinced puts us in good stead, well, did put us in good stead up until this period, but maybe we should have to look at that again. And I think that's one of the things that Londoners should demand, certainly given how critical the Thames is to London. And actually, I think the best way to think of the Thames is actually the extension of the sea into London, because I think that gives us a bigger sense of its power over our lives. The rivers, I've mentioned the River Brent, but there are many others in London. The ones in central London include the Fleet, Tyburn, Westbourne, I can go on. But they're essentially rivers that most Londoners don't know about, because they're covered. And I think there is a need to move towards river restoration, because actually by keeping them in channels and what have you, we also risk flash floods from infrastructure not being able to cope. And that's what we've had in Barnet, for example. Oddly enough, we had a list of, one of the things the Environment Committee did recently was get the Environment Agency in front of us, and they said there are about 24,000 homes which are at high risk. Of those 24,000 spread across London, about 14,000 haven't got any kind of cover at all. And it was interesting that well, some of them were in the obvious places like in Richmond and Kingston on the river, along the riversides down in West London, but other places like Waltham Forest and Barnet, and Croydon. You'd think, well, what's that about? Well, actually, there is a logical reason for something like 2,500, 3,000 properties in Waltham Forest being at high risk of flooding, because the River Lee and the River Ching are the two rivers there, and they have been overflowing. In Croydon, I don't know the river there actually, but the problem there is actually that the river overflowing and going into a waste management plant, and that's where all the commotion's been there, because actually that's the last thing you want is sewage going into the water supplies. And as I said, the groundwater one I think is the most difficult to deal with. It hasn't helped by households concreting over their front gardens and making their front gardens literally car pads. The worst place I've seen for that is actually in Southall, in Ealing. Now, I'm not knocking the people of Southall, and I think we should have offered them a better take on transport, so I'm sure they wouldn't be as reliant on their private vehicles if they were decent bus services along Uxbridge Road and maybe even a tram. But that's the reality. We've actually concreted over a lot more land by small measures like that than people realise. It's the equivalent of 18 Hyde Parks so far, and that trend's increasing. It's not just a suburban thing. You can go to posh bits of town, the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, and you see a similar phenomenon going there. So as a result, if there is rainwater intensively, when it's going into the sewers, it actually chokes up very quickly and causes flash floods, as we've had in Barnet recently. So I think that's the context of floods in London. I hope you're not scared by those prospects. But I think it's also interesting how, we take it for granted, we accept this as all linked with climate change, but we've still got to do a job of persuading the public out there. And I think the best way I've seen in the last week has actually been by Ed Miliband, by suggesting it's an issue of national security. And I think that may put the frights into people, but I think that's the way it's worth presenting. Whilst we can agree the science is clear, we are sleepwalking into this crisis over climate change. But we've also got to live with water. I mean, many societies do. And at the same time, we need to emphasise the adaptations we need to do. I mentioned one that's historically been done in Thames Barrier, and the mitigations that we need to do. Now, I hope that's going to be the scope of our discussions after our talks. And then fuel poverty. Now, actually, we recently over Christmas did a survey of the cost of living. This is me pushing my political colours now, the Labour group at the Assembly. Cost of living survey. And we found actually over the 2,000 odd sample that we had, that 80% of people, the main cost of living concern wasn't actually housing, even though you think it's very expensive. Wasn't transport costs, even though every January we get an uplift on fares and what have you. It was actually utility bills. It was gas, electricity, and water. 85%. And I think we should be very, very focused on that. And I think actually some of the proposals that a future Labour government have put up, the freezing of water, energy prices, is something I would like to see. If anything, I think we need to do something sooner. We saw that. We also found in the survey that about 68% of people are actually have actually, as a result of the high prices, reduced their energy consumption. Now, some people may welcome that, but I'd like to think people should still have the possibility of keeping the heating on if they feel cold, and particularly when they're having to choose between food and heating. We're the 8th richest country in the world, and we've got 500,000 people depending on food banks, and we have this in London as well. one of the most shocking site meetings I made was to go to a Peckham food bank, and where we came across a mother who was saying actually she's having to return the food because she can't afford to heat it. Could you give me cold food? Now, it didn't even dawn on me that people were living in those circumstances until I saw that. So that's why I think the fuel poverty issue we shouldn't lose sight of in the context of everything that's happening. And I do think in the context of environmental concerns, because I think sometimes we tend to kind of go for the big picture stuff and lose what's actually hitting people on a day-to-day level. And on this respect, actually, the Mayor has been failing Londoners in a major way. Firstly, by not taking on the energy companies and water companies. They tend to get what they want in London when they want money or assistance. I'll give you one example, EDF. They got a heck of a lot of publicity out of the Olympics to show their green credentials. Has that been delivered after the Olympics? Not one chance in hell. So they've actually done, that's what I mean by them doing very well. He did have an installation programme. He set it up. I've been regularly keeping a check on that myself at the Assembly. He wanted to retrofit 200,000 homes by December 2012. At the time, I was always saying he was not going to get to that target. He only got to about 80,000. And a year after, or a year and a bit, he's still only under, just reached 99,000. And 200,000 out of 3.3 million households in London just shows the extent of the problem and his inability to focus on this and deliver his own programme with the targets he's set himself. So that's the second part of the story from the Mayor. The third element is that actually we do need alternative energy sources. We have to move away from the cartel that provide us with energy. It's only dawned on Ed Davey at DEC that actually there was a bit of a racket going on when British Gas has got 40% of the energy market and can increase energy prices by 9%. Whatever they say this morning, I heard this chief executive, the reality is that's their market's position. And Ed Davey has been actually behind the curve on this. And I would like to say Ed Miliband's credit, he was up for saying that last September. So the Lib Dems seem to be coming to where we are. As I've said, I'd like to see measures done now rather than wait till 2015. But that's the political system we have. And finally, I don't think he's really encouraging alternative energy sources. There's actually a heck of a lot of things we can do, even basic things like solar panels in housing estates and what have you. If they can make a contribution to the communal lighting and things like this, which people have to bear service charges, there are many other things like that can be done, and with the right incentives and the right place and priority given through planning, through giving people the means to do those kind of things, we can be a lot less dependent. I've been out to see the wind farms, for example, in the Thames Estuary. It's kind of accepted that it's not acceptable to have wind farms on land, but if they're out in the Thames Estuary, it's readily more acceptable. We just need to bring the supply in. But oddly, the Mayor's proposal for the Thames Estuary Airport actually would have taken up. It's not going to happen, but it would potentially have taken up a whole 2 or 3 blocks of wind farms being extended into the Thames Estuary and actually nearer to shore. So those are the choices we're having in London. I just hope you're focused at not just what national government can do, but also what we can do regionally, because it does hit Londoners very perversely in a number of ways.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to have a discussion in a moment, but I just want to hand you over to something rather magical.
Well,
Sounds like very magical.
right,